Hey, I'm back. I finally got around to watching the season 2 trailer of the Wheel of Time TV show on Amazon Prime. I also watched the opening of season 2 that they just tacked on to the end of episode 8 of season 1, and I'm here to talk about it. My overall reaction to this season 2 trailer is that it's not going to be all that different from season 1. If you liked season 1, you will probably like season 2. You'll probably like it more since it draws from books 2 and 3, which in my opinion are better than book 1. The characters have bigger growth arcs and the dangers are more visceral. But if you are like me and feel that season 1 was in the end a poor adaptation of the book series, Season 2 is not going to be an improvement. Nothing is going to be repaired when it comes to how the story is being adapted, especially when it comes to the characters and themes as well as the magic system and world building. It's important to understand that Amazon Studios is not really trying to do an adaptation of Robert Jordan's vision of The Wheel of Time, the story that he wrote. This show exists to make money off of audiences that like fantasy shows. It borrows high fantasy ideas from the author, but the show is not attempting to honor Robert Jordan or faithfully render his story or ideas to screen as intact as possible, even within the limitations set by the studio. If you accept that this is essentially corporate fan fiction, the Wheel of Time series is kind of fun to watch. It's like a weird dream of what the Wheel of Time could have been. If you haven't read the books, though, you might need to watch it alongside someone who has, because you might need someone to explain to you what is going on. You will find things to appreciate. The cast is great, and I wish we could have seen what they could have done with better material. It will also be colorful, and I happen to like the color palette. The costumes will be interesting to look at, even if you don't think that they really reflect what is described in the books, as I do not. And the story will still be enjoyable, even if it is kind of a shallow fantasy and not exceptional as it could have been if the adaptation wasn't so free-handed. That's the good news. Here's the bad news. The metaphysical reality of the books will be altered. The magic will not be a coherent system, all the characters will have different personalities, the plot won't always make sense, and the themes will be muted or mangled to map to the taste of the showrunner rather than the author. If you watch my reviews of season 1, you'll know that I am a long-time fan of the book series. I really tried to get into this show, but I ultimately was disappointed in it as an adaptation, and even as its own standalone thing, I think the writing fails in a lot of areas. However, I differ from other critics politically. I don't believe that this show's problem is that it's woke. A lot of other reviewers critical of this show overly focus, in my opinion, on the racial diversity of the cast and the amplification of the LGBTQ themes. I do not believe that this is what makes the show fail. I do understand the criticisms. The diversity in casting is critiqued because in the book, the group that sets out from Edmund's Field are supposed to be a rural, homogenized people who have been isolated from the rest of the world for hundreds of years and don't trust outsiders. The book's characters are conservatives who become more liberal through exposure to different cultures and values. That is part of the story in the books, and I really identified with it growing up. The TV show erases that. Similarly, in the book series, the magic system is gendered. A core theme of the story is that men and women are equal, but fail to conquer evil when they don't cooperate. The TV show dispenses with any explanation of the magic system, and there are implications that this was done to avoid a gender binary. In doing so, the Wheel of Time TV show is the only media I have personally been exposed to that actually gives some credence to the myth that the acceptance of transgender and non-binary people erases gender or is somehow threatening to feminism. I'd like to cover that controversy in more detail, but not right now. All I will say right now is that the Wheel of Time book series is fundamentally feminist, but it is not radically feminist. The Wheel of Time was written in the 1990s by Robert Jordan, a white man, who created a fantasy world where men and women are equal, but where gender roles and balances of power take on different forms in different cultures. The Wheel of Time is also not a matriarchy, as I have seen some people claim. Some countries in the Wheel of Time have female monarchs, but that doesn't make the world, or any of those countries, matriarchies. In order to be a matriarchy, there has to be a legally enforced system of power that advantages all women over all men in that country. The only actual matriarchy that we see in the Wheel of Time is formatting, and we don't spend more than a few chapters there. Radical feminists are represented in the story by the Red Aja, but they are a minority opinion even among Aes Sedai. In the books, it is true that only women can be Aes Sedai, at least in the Third Age, but this is because of the taint on Saidin, the male half of the true source. It is not men that are corrupt because of their bodies or souls, which is sort of implied by the TV show. The Wheel of Time book series is also LGBTQ friendly and always has been. However, it was kind of obscured due to the time period it was published, so adding more overt LGBTQ characters to the story was a good idea. However, changing the fundamental nature of the magic system to be non-binary or just not explained doesn't make sense. All this did was confuse audiences. No one understood the power in this series. It is not clear that the power has two halves, male and female, or that souls are male and female in this fictional metaphysical reality. I do understand that alluding to souls being gendered can be invalidating, but I think that there were better ways to be inclusive of transgender and non-binary people, and I would rather the adaptation just told the story and allow people to discuss it and debate whether its metaphysical reality is problematic. As it stands, the TV show is just confusing, where it is not offensive. We are served a post-apocalyptic Earth where cultural differences are non-existent except in the extremes, such as the Aiel and the Swanshan. LGBTQ romances are amped up to such a degree that it interferes with the integrity of the characters, who should be mission-driven and married to their work rather than each other. And feminism is portrayed as women being dismissive of men, and men being either violent or relegated to the background. In my opinion, this is not woke. In fact, the Wheel of Time series lacks the gender equality and nuanced, empowering feminist messaging of the original book series. It also has nothing interesting to say about cultural identity and diversity, at least so far, and although I appreciate the inclusivity of LGBTQ characters, I think it could have been emphasized more without mangling the story. And I don't expect it to be different in Season 2, with the exception that the male characters, and Rand in particular, will have to get more development to carry the story forward. That being said, I do plan to watch and review Season 2. Again, it's kind of like watching a weird dream you had of the Wheel of Time. I also have some predictions. And here's where we get into spoilers, which do tend to be light on my channel, but if you don't want to know anything, this is where you can check out. You can check back in after the season is over and see if any of my predictions were correct. First off, we are seeing a conflation of the events in Book 2, The Great Hunt, with events in Book 3, The Dragon Reborn. I don't think that this show has time for Rand to run away from his destiny twice like he does in the books. Instead of Rand joining Ingtar to hunt for the Horn of Valir and help his friends, Rand is going to run away from everyone like he does in Book 3, only to then run toward his destiny and face his tormentor, who everyone thinks at this point in time is the Dark One. New villains are introduced. The season opens with this cabal of dark friends, including Padden Fane, which we see in the sneak peek that was just released. These dark friends have been brought together by this guy, who refers to himself as both Forsaken and Chosen in this scene. If you remember, the prologue of Book 2 of The Great Hunt also opens with the secret meeting of dark friends, but it is a dream rather than in person, and the POV character is the mysterious Bors rather than this random little girl who is presumably the daughter of a dark friend. This guy goes on philosophically for a while about the nature of monsters, and then is affectionate towards the Trollocs, which I don't know if I like that, but we'll see what they do with it in the show. I also have seen a lot of speculation as to whether or not this cute little girl is going to be fed to the Trollocs, and in my opinion, if you're keeping with the themes of the original book series, she probably should be. Maybe not right away, but I could see that as being a twist later on in the story to let you know that bad guys are bad in the Wheel of Time. The Dark One is evil in the Wheel of Time, and those who serve him are not good people, and they will do very bad things even to those that they love. I hope that the story keeps this because there are other aspects of evil that are explored in the story which do have more shades of gray, such as whether or not you can interpret Rand as a good or bad person in the middle of the tale. But we don't want to get too much into spoilers, so we will save that for future seasons. Who is a dark friend is a big part of the plot of book 2, and that looks like something that will carry over into the show. There will be fear and paranoia, and the characters will hunt for Padan Fain, a dark friend that we know is a dark friend, as well as experience betrayal and reversals from supposed allies no one knew to be dark friends. This will culminate in a confrontation between Rand and the Dark One, by the end of the season, most likely. There will also be at least one female Forsaken introduced, which I, for one, am very excited about. This is one of the more intriguing shots in the trailer, showing who must be Lanfear escaping imprisonment. We will see Lanfear trying to cozy up to Rand as well, but I suspect a lot of the details surrounding this will be quite different from how it plays out in the book. And we'll also get the Swanshan, invading armies from across the sea who have barbaric practices in how they treat people who can channel. We see Damani doing coordinated damage with the One Power and wearing muzzles rather than collars like they do in the books. This person here looks like the High Lady Suroth, and this man the High Lord Turok, who command the forerunners of the Swanshan invasion. Turok will be presented with the Horn of Valor by Padan Fain, which he then proclaims will allow the Swanshan to conquer the whole world. In the books, Turok is a more measured character, loyal to the Empress, and has no ambitions to blow the horn himself, if indeed he even believes that it is real. We know from the introductory scene with the Cabal of Dark Friends that at least one of the Swanshan is a dark friend because they showed the fingernails. However, this detail may be lost on casual viewers unfamiliar at this time with these cultures. In case it's not clear though, this guy is also shown standing right next to them. To combat these combined forces of darkness, our protagonist will need some power-ups. Rand, for example, needs to learn how to channel. Maybe he'll also learn to use the sword he's been lugging around, although I don't know how since he hasn't been shown to be training with Lan at all in the series so far. Rand does have a chance to actually be the main character this season though, or at least more of a main character. But it's going to be hard to make Rand a likable character at this point, since we learned almost nothing about him in Season 1, and the show seems to be skipping all the story arcs where he is shown to be a likable person. At this point in the story, at least in the books, Rand is a sweet shepherd boy who cares about his friends even more than he's afraid of Aes Sedai controlling him. We follow Rand around and start to see him develop as a leader in this book. But in the TV adaptation, Rand is paranoid, angry, and violent, despite having barely channeled at all and being generally unaware at this juncture about just how hard his destiny is going to be on him, both physically and emotionally. As an aside, although it's not the core theme of this particular book, the emotional neglect that Rand experiences as the Dragon Reborn is one of the things I like most about the story. Not that he experiences that, but the tension that it creates and the sympathy that I have in the character because of just how hard the task is that he is given to do and how little anyone helps him. I will be particularly disappointed if that is not conveyed well in this TV adaptation of The Wheel of Time. What I really want to emphasize is that this image of Rand choking Maureen is not the character of Randall Thor in the books. Rand is supposed to be pathologically chivalrous toward women. I don't care if the fans or the staff writers didn't like that aspect of his character and decided to change it. That is his character. Rand can't hurt women. He doesn't trust Aes Sedai, but he won't hurt them. And this is pretty important to the story. He does kind of like Maureen in the books, at least at this point in the series, but he doesn't quite trust even her. But TV Rand doesn't like Maureen at all. Rand's motivations for running away are also going to be confusing, since this version of his character seems unafraid of power and hateful toward anyone trying to control him. Like, that's the core character that we've been given so far. Scenes in the trailer suggest that Rand will be tormented in his dreams by, and we'll just say it, Ishamael, which is reminiscent of what happens in the books, or possibly he experiences revelations while trying to use a portal stone. Regardless, this image of Rand bound to a wheel in the desert doesn't work for me, even as a dream. The trailer ends with Rand confronting the Amyrlin seat and saying he doesn't want to be a spoke on the wheel. The Amyrlin replies that Rand isn't the spoke, he's the watcher. This line sounds cool. The actress delivers it very profoundly, and you get the gravitas and emotional intent. You are in control of your destiny. You control all of our destinies. But the metaphor is nonsense. The wheel of time is a spinning wheel, not a water wheel. Rand's soul is bound to the wheel, but his life is a thread in the pattern. This is the metaphysical reality of the wheel of time. Even Swan Sanche, who makes everything about water and fish, shouldn't mess this up. Mixing up the story's primary religious concept does not inspire me that the writing in season 2 is going to be better than in season 1, at least in terms of it being an adaptation. It also appears that Rand goes to Tarvalin in this season, which never happens in the books until almost the very, very end of the story, because Rand in the books knows that he would be taken captive and never released, if not outright gentled or killed by Aes Sedai, because he is a man who can channel. But in the TV series, in season 2, when Rand should be terrified of Aes Sedai, we see him strolling down the corridors of the White Tower and confronting the Amyrlin seat in her throne room. It is possible that this is a dream sequence, but I don't think so because we also see Rand talking to Logain, and that seems to be a lot to fit into the setting in a dream. I am disappointed, though, because there is a scene in Book 2 where Rand is summoned to the Amyrlin seat in Feldara, and it is one of my favorite scenes in the whole series. It's cute because Rand at that time doesn't know what to do with himself. He is not confident. He doesn't have any sense of his destiny and what is going to happen to him. In the books, he doesn't even know he's a Dragon Reborn. I'm not going to speculate how and why this plays out differently in season 2, but I do fear that some of the logic won't make a lot of sense, particularly how Rand gets to and from the White Tower and the Amyrlin seat throne room in this season. But whatever. Rand is somehow in Tarvalin, and then he is allowed to leave Tarvalin, which could be what instigates Swan Sanche's fall in the TV series, which is kind of similar to what happens in the books, but, a little bit different. At any rate, Rand is going to go to Falme somehow to face who he thinks is the Dark One, and the Dark One is allied with the Swanchan, so he'll have to face them too. Rand is going to need some help, so what are the other characters doing? Iguin and Nynaeve are going to Tarvalin in this season 2 in order to start their training to become Aes Sedai. Here is Iguin in Novice White learning to channel. They will meet Elaine, the daughter heir of Andor. If Rand goes to Tarvalin, maybe he will meet Elaine there since he did not meet her in season 1, whereas in the books he meets her in Camelin. Maybe Elaine is the one to help Rand get into the White Tower instead of the palace in Camelin, although I don't know why, or why she'd have the power to do that. Nynaeve will also take her acceptance test, which looks like it will have different trials than what Nynaeve experiences in the books. It should be noted that Nynaeve's character has been somewhat different in the TV show than her character is in the books. In the books, Nynaeve is conservative and saucy. She is not violent. In the TV show, Nynaeve stabs someone in season 1, and now we have this. It could be that this scene is just a vision from her test, and maybe we'll see her reject this version of herself as part of her growth in the story, but it's a little weird. Nynaeve in the books didn't have an identity crisis. She knew exactly who she was, and she hated violence. She was a healer, despite falling in love with a man who embodies violence. Regardless, Nynaeve will become accepted, and Iguin and Elaine will become novices. I don't know if Men is even in Tarvalin, as I didn't see her in the trailer, but she will be if she plays the same role that she plays in the second book. The girls will become friends, but they will also become targets for Dark Friends, as they are in the books. I don't want to give too many spoilers, but they get terrorized and captured a number of times between books 2 and 4 in the Wheel of Time book series. The TV show looks like it's going to condense the number of times this happens. Somehow, maybe not exactly like it happens in the books, they will be tricked into leaving Tarvalin because they fear it is an unsafe place and end up near Falme, where they will run into the Swanchan. There will be a battle, which they should lose, being both surprised and barely trained. I don't know if the exact same plot will unfold, but I hope so, because it's one of the most exciting sequences in the early books, with a lot of character growth for all of these characters. I don't quite know how Matt fits into this, but if you remember, Matt should also be in Tarvalin for the TV adaptation because he didn't come through the gate in the season 1 of The Wheel of Time. If Rand goes to Tarvalin, maybe Matt will tag along with him in the hunt for the dagger that Padan Fain stole along with the horn. Or maybe Matt will run into Tom Merrilin and chase after Iguin and Nynaeve after they depart Tarvalin because he learns of a Dark Friend plot to hurt them, like he does in Book 3. The reason I think that this is plausible is because there is a scene where it looks like Matt is using fireworks to blow something up. Don't ask me what or where, but I don't think it's the Stone of Tyr. We might not get that plotline at all. Regardless, this might mean that Matt becomes a more likable character faster than he does in the books. We can hope that his luck runs good. Meanwhile, Perrin will get involved with the hunt for the horn. The hunt is primarily going to be Perrin's story, as neither Rand nor Matt are in Feldara anymore. We have seen from casting that Elias is in the season, so my prediction is that Elias will replace Huron as the sniffer that accompanies Ingtar and the Shinarans chasing after Padan Fain to recover the Horn of Valir as well as the dagger. Elias will train Perrin in the ways of being a wolf brother, and he'll finally get some character development there. Fael has also been cast, so in keeping with the conflation of books 2 and 3, Perrin will likely meet Fael in this season. She may or may not join them, but since she proclaims herself to be a hunter of the horn, it would make sense for her to join. Avienda has also been cast and will also show up in this season, although it might only be briefly. In the books, Perrin and the Shinarans do run into Samael. Avienda is not known to be among them, but she could be. This encounter could also happen in some other way. Elaine, Iguin, and Nynaeve meet Avienda in Book 3, so maybe instead they will meet her in Season 2, which again is combining Books 2 and 3. Or maybe Rand will meet her. Hard to say. I don't know where Loial is in this season. In the books, he is with Rand for much of the plot, but I suspect he'll be with Perrin instead of Rand in the TV adaptation. However, I honestly don't know. There also has to be a storyline for Maureen in this season. In Book 2, Maureen does a lot of research off-page, but I think in the TV show we're going to follow her around as she is doing her research. Based on the trailer, Maureen seems to think that Ishamael is the Dark One, but she might be having suspicions that he is not. Presumably, she will start doing some research and learn that it is the Forsaken that are loosed, not the Dark One. I suspect she might get this information from Varen Sedai, who has been cast for Season 2, and whom she might seek out instead of Vandene and her sister Adelaus. If you remember, Maureen also does not have the ability to channel this season. I hope, honestly, that she's just tied off from the source and not severed. The writers could be using this as a vehicle to explain the difference, including how Aes Sedai, whose shields have been tied off, can untie them if given sufficient time. But we'll see. So, in summary, this season could potentially be a closer adaptation of the books than Season 1 if they don't further mangle the themes and lore. All the things in the trailer that reflect moments from the actual books are pretty exciting to watch. My reservations about Season 2 is that the trailer for Season 1 fooled me into thinking the adaptation would try to be as true to the books as possible, and then it wasn't. I have no reason to believe that Season 2 will be any different. I also don't think that they can undo what they did in Season 1. They would have to retcon most of Moiraine's speeches to align thematically with the book series at this point, and I just don't think that they're going to do that. I think we are going to continue to get a somewhat clumsy way of explaining the world, as well as unnecessary changes to orchestrate big moments that don't make a lot of sense when the magic system is not explained. I also think the Wheel of Time TV show will be a fundamentally confusing show to watch if you haven't read at least some of the books. This is great for explanatory social media channels like mine, but I would personally have preferred more adherence to the original source material. As it stands, I think that I will moderately enjoy Season 2, and particularly reactions to it from people who haven't read the books. I'm kind of over what they did in Season 1, I'm adapted to it. I don't like it, and I think that they've weakened the story, but hopefully there won't be any other big surprises. However, I do find that this show is hard to recommend, especially to fans of the book series. And that's unfortunate, because the Wheel of Time TV show could have been a huge hit, like mega huge, if the showrunner had less power to remake the story in his own image and the staff writers had been instructed to follow the rules of Robert Jordan's world and kept the characters and themes the same. It could have been an enormously successful studio cash cow. And maybe it still will be. Maybe. I know Wheel of Time fans have a lot of opinions about this, and I am not the first reviewer to this party, so sound off in the comments below, and I will see you in September.